The pressure cooker. The fluorescent lights of Henderson and Associates hummed their monotonous tune as Patton Crawford straightened his tie for the third time that morning. At 42, he had perfected the art of swallowing his words, of nodding politely when his ideas were dismissed, of watching younger colleagues take credit for his work. His cubicle on the 7th floor of the Chicago office building had become both his refuge and his prison. Outside, November rain hammered against the windows, turning Michigan Avenue into a river of umbrellas and yellow cabs. The city felt as gray as Patton's mood. Crawford. My office. Now. The voice belonged to Dennis Hartley, the department director who had made Patton's last 5 years a masterclass in professional humiliation. Patton rose slowly, his knees protesting. He'd been at his desk since 6:30, trying to finish the Morrison account proposal that was due by noon. The proposal he'd spent 3 weeks perfecting, researching every detail, crafting every argument. Dennis's office smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. The man sat behind his mahogany desk, not even looking up from his phone as Patton entered. Sit. Patton sat, hands folded in his lap, waiting. This was the dance they did. Dennis would make him wait, establish dominance, remind him who held the power. Finally, Dennis looked up, his smile sharp as broken glass. I'm reassigning the Morrison presentation. The words hit Patton like a physical blow. Excuse me. Brad's going to present it. Kid's got charisma, you know. The kind of energy clients respond to. Dennis leaned back in his leather chair. You understand, right? Nothing personal. Everything was personal. 3 weeks of late nights, of missing his daughter Emma's volleyball games, of microwave dinners eaten alone at his desk. All of it, gone. I developed that entire strategy, Patton said quietly, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest like steam in a kettle. Every projection, every market analysis. And we appreciate your hard work, Patton. We really do. Dennis's tone suggested he appreciated nothing at all. Brad will give you credit in the presentation. It's a team effort, after all. Patton knew what that meant. Brad Mitchell, 28 years old with his Harvard MBA and his father's connections, would claim the Morrison account as his own triumph. Just like he'd claimed the Riverside deal. Just like he'd claimed the Peterson acquisition strategy. Is that all? Patton's jaw ached from clenching. Actually, no. Dennis pulled out a folder. I need you to train Brad on your methodology. Walk him through everything. He presents on Friday. Today was Tuesday. Patton stood, the room tilting slightly. Of course. Back at his cubicle, he stared at his computer screen without seeing it. Around him, the office buzzed with Tuesday morning energy, keyboards clacking, phones ringing, the coffee machine gurgling in the break room. Normal sounds of a normal day. His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife, Janet, Emma's recital is Thursday at 7. Don't be late this time. He'd already missed 2. The divorce had been finalized 8 months ago, and Janet had been right about everything. He'd chosen this job over his family, swallowed his pride so many times it had become part of his digestive system, let himself become invisible. Hey, Patton. Brad's voice was cheerful, oblivious. He bounded over like a golden retriever, all teeth and enthusiasm. Dennis told me the good news. This is going to be amazing. I'm thinking we grab lunch, and you can download me on the Morrison thing. Patton looked at Brad, really looked at him. The expensive suit, the confident posture, the assumption that the world would always bend in his favor. And why wouldn't it? It always had. Sure, Brad, Patton heard himself say. Lunch sounds great. At his desk, Patton opened his drawer and pulled out the bottle of antacids he kept there. He chewed 2 tablets, then 3. The chalky taste matched his mood. His colleague, Martha Rodriguez, appeared at his cubicle entrance. She was 55, a brilliant analyst who'd been passed over for promotion 6 times. They'd shared war stories over countless lunches. "I heard," she said simply, her dark eyes sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Patton." "It's fine." The lie tasted worse than the antacids. "No, it's not." Martha crossed her arms. "How many times are you going to let them do this to you? What choice do I have? I need this job. The alimony, Emma's college fund. There are other jobs. Other companies that would value someone with your experience." Patton shook his head. "I'm 42, Martha. Not 28 with an Ivy League degree and connections. I'm the guy companies downsize, not the guy they hire." Martha looked like she wanted to argue, but her phone rang. She squeezed his shoulder once before leaving. Patton turned back to his computer and opened his Morrison presentation. 347 slides. Weeks of work. He began copying it to share with Brad, each click of the mouse feeling like another small surrender. His phone rang. His daughter. "Hey, sweetie. Dad, you're still coming Thursday, right?" Emma's voice held cautious hope. "It's the fall showcase. I have a solo." Patton's chest tightened. "Of course I'll be there. I promised. You promised last time too. This time is different. I swear, Em. Nothing will keep me away." After she hung up, Patton stared at his calendar. Thursday at 7. The same day Dennis had scheduled a critical meeting with the Morrison team, which now meant Brad. The meeting Dennis had just added this morning, probably specifically to test Patton's compliance. The rain outside intensified, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled over Lake Michigan. At lunch, Brad talked non-stop about his vision for the Morrison presentation, ideas that were barely modified versions of what Patton had already written. The younger man didn't seem to notice, or care, that he was erasing Patton with every confident declaration. "The key is confidence," Brad said, cutting into his steak. "Clients can smell fear. You've got to own the room, you know." Patton nodded, pushing his salad around his plate. His stomach was too knotted for food. "You seem tense, man," Brad observed. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Patton lied again. "Just a lot on my mind." "Well, don't stress about Morrison. I've got this." Brad winked. "You did the grunt work. I'll bring it home." The grunt work. 30 years of experience reduced to grunt work. Back at the office, Patton spent the afternoon walking Brad through every detail of the Morrison strategy. The younger man took notes on his iPad, occasionally nodding, frequently checking his phone. At 5 o'clock, Dennis appeared. "Patton, don't forget, Thursday's meeting is mandatory. I need you there for any technical questions Brad might have. I have a family commitment Thursday evening." Dennis's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure your family will understand. This is your career we're talking about." After Dennis left, Patton sat in the dimming office, most of his colleagues already gone. The cleaning crew moved through the hallways, emptying trash cans, vacuuming. The smell of industrial cleaner mixed with stale coffee. His reflection in his darkened computer screen showed a man he barely recognized. When had he become so small? So gray? So defeated? Martha stopped by his cubicle on her way out. "Going home? Soon?" "Patton." She hesitated. "You know what they say about teaching someone to treat you?" "What's that?" "People will treat you the way you teach them to treat you." She adjusted her purse strap. "Think about what lesson you've been teaching." After she left, Patton finally shut down his computer. The office was nearly empty now, just him and the security guard making rounds on the lower floors. He took the elevator down, each floor number lighting up and then dimming. Ground floor. He stepped out into the lobby with its polished marble floors and modern art installations that probably cost more than his annual salary. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the streets were slick and shining. The evening rush hour clogged Michigan Avenue with brake lights and impatient horns. Patton walked to the train station, his briefcase heavy with documents he'd probably read later tonight, stealing time from sleep. On the train heading north to his studio apartment in Rogers Park, he watched other commuters. A young woman FaceTimed with a giggling toddler. An older man dozed, his head resting against the window. A couple shared earbuds, listening to something that made them smile. When had Patton last smiled like that? His apartment was dark and cold when he arrived. He'd forgotten to adjust the thermostat before leaving that morning. The space was small, just a living room that doubled as a bedroom, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. Most of his furniture had gone to Janet in the divorce. She'd kept the house too, the one they'd bought when Emma was born, with the big backyard and the porch swing. Patton heated up leftover Chinese food and sat at his tiny table, the silence pressing against his ears. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through photos. Emma's last birthday. The vacation they'd taken to Wisconsin Dells before the divorce. Janet laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm. When had everything gone so wrong? He knew the answer. It had been gradual, a slow erosion. Every time he'd worked late instead of attending a school event. Every time he'd let Dennis humiliate him and said nothing. Every time he'd chosen security over self-respect, he'd lost a piece of himself. And now, on Thursday, he'd have to choose again. Emma's recital or Dennis's manufactured crisis. Patton pushed his food away, appetite gone. He stood at his window, looking out at the Chicago skyline glittering in the distance. Somewhere in one of those buildings, Brad was probably out with friends, celebrating his upcoming presentation. Dennis was probably at an expensive restaurant, expensing the meal. The world kept turning, indifferent to Patton Crawford's quiet misery. His phone buzzed. Another text from Janet, "She's really excited you're coming this time. Please don't disappoint her again." Patton closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every compromise, every swallowed word, every bent knee pressing down on his shoulders. Something had to change. But what could one invisible man do against a system designed to keep him that way? Cracks in the facade. Wednesday morning arrived with a crystalline blue sky, the kind of November day Chicago occasionally gifted its residents between stretches of gray. Patton stood on the train platform, coffee in hand, watching his breath mist in the cold air. He'd barely slept, his mind cycling through scenarios, conversations, confrontations that would never happen. The office was already buzzing when he arrived at 7. Brad was holding court by the coffee machine, regaling a group of younger associates with a story about his weekend in Milwaukee. His laughter carried across the floor, confident and carefree. Patton settled at his desk and opened his email. 217 unread messages. He began the familiar routine of sorting, prioritizing, responding to crises that weren't really crises but would be treated as such. Morning, Crawford. Dennis appeared without warning, perching on the edge of Patton's desk like a bird of prey. "I need you to compile all the Morrison data into a briefing doc for Brad. He needs to be completely prepared for Friday. I already gave him everything. He needs it in a different format. Something he can digest more easily." Dennis smiled. "You know how it is with the younger generation. They need information packaged differently." What Dennis meant was, do more work so Brad can do less. "I'll have it done by end of day," Patton said flatly. "By noon would be better. Brad's taking the afternoon off to prepare mentally for the presentation." After Dennis left, Patton stared at his screen. His calendar reminder blinked, Emma's recital, 7 p.m. tomorrow. He pulled up the Morrison files and began reformatting them into what Dennis wanted. The work was mindless, degrading, taking his own analysis and dumbing it down, making it digestible for someone who couldn't be bothered to understand it deeply. At 10, his phone rang. His mother, calling from her assisted living facility in Naperville. "Patton, honey, I haven't heard from you in weeks." Guilt added itself to the weight on his shoulders. I'm sorry, Mom. Work's been crazy. It's always crazy. Her voice carried the gentle reproach only mothers could master. Your father worked himself to death, you know. Literally. Heart attack at his desk at 56. Don't make the same mistake. I won't, Mom. I promise. You said you'd visit last Sunday. Another broken promise. Another person he'd disappointed. I'll come this weekend. I swear. After they hung up, Patton pressed his palms against his eyes. His father, James Crawford, had been a systems analyst at a manufacturing firm. He'd spent 30 years being loyal to a company that laid off half its workforce 2 years after his death, no longer bound by promises to a dead man. Patton had inherited his father's work ethic and, apparently, his fate. Hey, Patton. Brad appeared, all energy and cologne. How's that briefing doc coming? Dennis said you'd have it ready. Almost done. Awesome. Hey, can you also put together a practice Q&A? Like, questions clients might ask and the best answers. Brad scrolled through his phone while talking, barely looking at Patton. I want to seem really prepared, you know. You could read the research reports. All the answers are there. Brad laughed like Patton had made a joke. Dude, those reports are like 300 pages. I don't have time for that. You've got it all in your head already. Just write down the highlights. After Brad left, Martha appeared. I'm making a coffee run. You look like you need something stronger, but coffee will have to do. They walked to the Starbucks 2 blocks away. The November air was sharp and clean, a relief after the recycled office atmosphere. Michigan Avenue was crowded with professionals on coffee runs, tourists taking photos of the historic architecture, delivery trucks blocking traffic. You're going to miss Emma's recital, aren't you? Martha said as they walked. I don't know yet. Yes, you do. You're going to stay for Dennis's fake emergency meeting because you're terrified of losing this job. Patton stopped walking. You don't understand. I can't afford to lose this job. Can you afford to lose your daughter? Martha's voice was sharp. Because that's what's happening, Patton. Every time you choose this place over her, you're losing her a little more. That's not fair. Fair. Martha laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? I've been here 15 years. I have 2 master's degrees. I train every new director they hire, and those directors always end up making twice my salary. Last year, I wrote the proposal that landed the Tecton account, $20 million, and I got a fruit basket as a thank you. So don't talk to me about fair. They stood on the corner, pedestrians flowing around them like water around stones. Why do you stay? Patton asked. Because I'm 55, my husband has Parkinson's, and I need the health insurance. Martha's eyes were fierce. But you know what I don't do? I don't pretend it's anything other than what it is. This job is a transaction. They get my expertise, I get money and benefits. That's it. I stopped expecting respect or recognition years ago. That's depressing. That's reality. But you still think if you just work hard enough, sacrifice enough, they'll finally see your value. That's the real tragedy, Patton. Not that they treat you badly, but that you keep hoping they'll stop. They got their coffees in silence and walked back. The conversation sat heavy between them, words that couldn't be unspoken. Back at his desk, Patton finished the briefing document and sent it to Brad. Then he started on the Q&A, spending 2 hours distilling his expertise into digestible bullet points for someone who couldn't be bothered to learn it himself. At noon, his phone rang. Janet. I'm calling to make sure you remember tomorrow. I remember. Patton, Emma practiced for months. This solo means everything to her. If you miss this. Janet trailed off. Never mind. I know you'll do what you always do. What's that supposed to mean? It means I stopped being surprised by your choices a long time ago. I just feel sorry for Emma. She still believes you'll show up. The call ended. Patton sat motionless, Janet's words echoing. Through his cubicle opening, he could see into Dennis's office. The director was laughing at something on his computer, probably a YouTube video, his afternoon free while Patton worked. At 2 o'clock, Brad sent an email, got the docs. Looks good. Taking off early to hit the gym and clear my head for tomorrow's prep. You're the best, man. The casualness of it, the breezy assumption that Patton's time and expertise were freely available, sparked something hot in his chest. But he tamped it down, as always, swallowing it like he swallowed everything else. The afternoon crawled by. Patton answered emails, attended a meeting where Dennis took credit for Patton's workflow optimization, and watched the clock edge toward 5. Around him, colleagues began packing up, chatting about evening plans, real lives waiting outside these walls. You heading out? Martha stopped by his desk. Soon. I want to finish the Morrison timeline first. Why? So Brad can glance at it for 30 seconds and take all the credit. Because it's my job. Martha shook her head slowly. No, Patton. Your job is to do good work. What you're doing is enabling your own exploitation. She shouldered her purse. Think about it. Really think about it. After she left, the office grew quiet. The cleaning crew arrived, their cartwheels squeaking on the polished floors. Patton kept working, perfecting documents for a presentation he wouldn't give, for credit he'd never receive. At 7, his phone rang. Emma. Dad, are you still at work? Yeah, sweetie. Just finishing up some things. Mom says you're always just finishing up things. Emma's voice was small. You're still coming tomorrow, right? I'll be there. I promise. Okay. She didn't sound convinced. I'm going to be the wind in the fall scene. Mrs. Patterson says I have really good breath control for the flute. Patton closed his eyes, picturing his daughter on stage, nervous and proud, scanning the audience for his face. You're going to be amazing, Em. After they hung up, Patton saved his documents and shut down his computer. The office was dark except for the emergency lighting and the glow from the city outside. He walked to the elevator, past Dennis's office with its nameplate gleaming even in the dim light, Dennis Hartley, Senior Director. In the elevator, Patton caught his reflection in the polished steel doors. He looked exhausted, older than his 42 years. His suit was wrinkled from a full day sitting. His tie was loosened. His eyes were flat. When had he become this person? This ghost of a man, haunting an office where nobody really saw him. The lobby was empty except for the night security guard, a man named Raymond who'd worked there for 20 years. They nodded to each other, two men who understood long hours and limited options. Outside, the evening had turned cold again. The earlier blue sky had given way to clouds, and the weather forecast predicted rain for Thursday. Patton walked to the train station, the city transformed by darkness into something both beautiful and threatening, all lit windows and shadowed streets. On the train, he found a seat by the window. His reflection ghosted against the darkness outside as the train moved north, stopping at station after station. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his work emails, a habit he couldn't break even outside the office. One new message from Dennis, sent 10 minutes ago: Patton, need you in by 7 a.m. tomorrow to prep Brad before the big day. Also confirming you'll be at the 5 p.m. strategy session. Non-negotiable. Thanks for being a team player. Non-negotiable. The meeting that would make him miss Emma's 7 o'clock recital. Patton stared at the email, reading it again and again. The casual dismissal of his time. The assumption of his compliance. The certainty that he would, once again, sacrifice what mattered for what didn't. His finger hovered over the reply button. He could say no. He could explain about Emma's recital, about promises he'd already broken, about a daughter who was learning that her father's word meant nothing. But he'd been through this calculation 100 times before. Saying no meant conflict. Conflict meant being labeled not a team player. Not being a team player meant being first on the list when layoffs came. And layoffs were always coming. Patton put his phone away without replying. Dennis would take his silence as agreement. He always did.